Good morning, friends. The fifth Sunday after Trinity. The intent, God as peace. Another very powerful intent. Let's explore this together. All the Trinity Sundays have a single intent, a focused idea. And we can take this focused idea and expand it into many activities in our life. Let's start with the collect. It's the most useful place to start. Grant, O Lord, that the course of this world may soon be so peaceably ordered by thy governance, that thy church may joyfully serve thee in all godly quietness. All godly quietness. Now, we don't need to think very long or very much detail when we think of the world and we wonder what's happening in the world. Our news media, or our newspapers, whatever, our general conversations indicate to us the conflicts in the world. And just appears to be almost beyond man's comprehension what to do about this, man's comprehension. And perhaps our leaders have got a little bit out of the habit of asking for additional help from this enormous resource within all of us, individually, the Christ within, the access to this infinite wisdom, deep compassion. Perhaps we don't do this very often. If we reread the words in the collect, grant, O Lord, we're making a request, that the course of this world may soon be so peaceably ordered by thy governance, thy law. Not necessarily man's law, but thy law. And then, what's the role of the church in this particular scenario? That thy church may joyfully serve thee in all godly quietness. Now, what might godly quietness be? I think we know if we do some meditation, or if we just have a quiet time, if we're simply sitting down with a big sigh after maybe big activities, busy time, whatever, we just sit quietly. If we close our eyes, we know what happens to our mind. It runs on. It runs on and on and on. It keeps talking to us about this and that. It's our little internal voice which keeps talking. We like this, we don't like that, so on and so on. We go over the affairs of the day, and it never stops. It never stops. The way that I look at godly quietness is, that is not godly quietness. That running on and on of that voice that chatters away all the time. What I like to think of is a monkey mind dashing about in the branches of a tree, getting attracted to this fruit and that fruit, and having a little fight over there and having a little chatter over here, all that sort of stuff. And that's what our minds do. Godly quietness is when that particular part of ourselves, and it's only part of ourselves, it's not the main part of ourselves by any stretch, it's a very minor part of ourselves, that chattering voice, when that is quietened down until it's almost imperceptible, and instead we're aware of a deep quietness within. And incidentally, spoiler alert, before I get to the end of this particular sermon, that is the peace of God. But just a little back to the story, because we really need to come to terms with this chattering voice within us so that we don't get distracted all the time. And that when this calms down within us, then we're aware of this perpetual gift, the spontaneous arising of the peace of God. And the idea then, if we can take this idea of the peace of God within each and every one of our hearts, that then is the spreading of an aspiration for the whole world. And why is that? Because that is God's law. Our hearts have the peace, the love of God, which comes with peace, and also wisdom. Peace, love, wisdom spontaneously arise in our hearts when we let them. Are they always there? Yes, always there. So why isn't it obvious? Because this other part of us, this so-called discriminating part of our mind, I want a glass of water, I'd like a piece of cheesecake, I like that person over there, all that stuff. It's important because you don't really want to do wrong things, and that helps you sort that bit out. But the deep inspiration doesn't come from that chattering mind. The connection with the peace of God doesn't come from that mind. It comes from the heart wisdom part of ourselves. So that's what this Sunday in Trinity is to remind us. We might have heard these words before, but we have to practice putting them into effect. Whenever we find our mind chattering, we just come back and we do the simple thing that we've talked about before, which is think of the breath, put our concentration on our breath, and just let the mind calm down. It's a simple technique, but it's very effective. St Paul is a tough guy, and he talks very straightforwardly to the different parts of the congregation that was spreading around the Mediterranean at the time, as he was walking and talking around there. And he talks to the congregation through his letters, and he talks to us. He says, the law is fulfilled in one word: thou shalt love thy neighbour as thyself. No, it's easy to say that, and we're well aware of that. And we're aware that that's part of the Ten Commandments. We're also aware, I hope, that that's really what Jesus spoke about most of the time of his 3 years of ministry. He said to everyone around, he sometimes sort of teased the scribes and the people who sort of knew about all this sort of thing. What's the most important commandment? Love the Lord thy God with all thy heart, and so on. Then he said, and love your neighbour as yourself. All these things you do to bring you closer to God. When he starts talking about the flesh lusteth and so on, this is sort of tough language, and we think, what's going on here? It's another sign, another indication of this part of ourselves that I've been talking about, this chattering part of the mind. The body itself doesn't have the emotions. That's another part of us. And our mind is another part of us. They're all different parts of us. When Paul talks about the body, that inclination, that desire doesn't come instantaneously from the body. It comes from the emotions. It comes from the mind. The chattering aspect of that then distracts us. So rather than sit down and think, oh, okay, so I'm not going to have so much sugar in my tea and all that sort of stuff, you're immediately setting up obstacles for yourself. The smart way to do it, the effective way to do it, is to get to the source of where that's coming from, the chattering mind. You calm the mind down and you find doing the right thing is almost effortless. Almost. The effort comes in calming the mind down first. So we've got to be skillful. As Jesus said, wise as serpents and harmless as doves, when we're dealing with these parts of ourselves. We would love to get access to this God as peace feeling. We know when it comes. We know there's deep serenity, there's deep peace. We have little flavours of it. I'm sure we all experience it from time to time. And we would like that to be our companion, part of us, most of the time, or even better, all of the time. So then we look to St John for the Gospel. And we look there and we think, okay, what has he got to say about this? Now, he writes from a different level. He writes maybe from a little bit of a mystical level, and that means different things to different people. And he talks about, this is Jesus speaking, when I speak the words the Father commands me to speak. When I act in the way the Father wants me to act. And he says to his disciples, when you see me, you see the Father. They don't quite understand that, and they keep asking him questions. But he's saying, you come to the Father via me. All the things I see and do, you can do. I show you signs and wonders. You can do signs and wonders. But, he says, listen, please, listen carefully. I do these things arising from the Father. You have to be connected to the Father as well. You automatically are, but you've got to realize it. You've got to put it into effect. You've got to live your life as if you really, really believe, and you really, really appreciate, and you understand deeply that the Father is in you. The Father and the Christ is in you. He's saying to his disciples, try and work with this. Try and understand this. You must understand this. He's saying to us, 2,000 years later, meditate on this. Very powerful. Very powerful. The Gospel concludes, peace I leave with you. My peace I give unto you. Not as the world giveth, give I unto you. Now, I could paraphrase that a little bit, and I could say, all those things, the chattering part of your mind, it's not the main part of your mind, but it's the thing that sort of tends to be there most of the time, unless you do something about it. The chattering part of your mind wants you to do stuff, wants you to buy stuff, and eat stuff, and drink stuff, and all that sort of thing, have all those friends and so on. Nothing wrong with all that, except the mind says, you'll be happy when you do all those things. And you find out that's not the case, always, or hardly ever, because you need more and more of it, or whatever it is. And Jesus reminds us what the story is. Peace I leave with you, not as the world giveth. Could paraphrase that and say, not as all these suggestions that part of your mind is telling you. That's not where satisfaction comes from. Satisfaction comes from the Christ within, tuning into that aspect of us, all of us, all of us. And then he concludes, let not your heart be troubled, speaking directly to each individual. Let not your heart be troubled, neither let it be afraid. So all of this is coming from the heart. We want our heart to be peaceful and restful. We would like to get access to the love wisdom. And so when that happens, two things happen simultaneously. We're aware of peace, and we're aware then of the aspirations that we have can really be put into effect through that love aspect. Not the chattering aspect, through the love aspect. So it's a very powerful combination that we're learning about this morning. That we do have to put ourselves in the right mind, in the right mind, in the mind of God. And just like the aspiration and the collect, where we say, we know that peace will come into this world when everybody follows God's law. That's what we say. And we say, we would want that to happen. We as Christians want that to happen. We will play our part. We're not going to sit passively here, just waiting for it, looking out the window, waiting for the second coming, whatever that means. We're not going to passively do that. From our side, we're going to work on ourselves. We're going to quieten down that noisy part of our mind, tune in to love wisdom, aspire to bring the peace of God within our lives and take one step after the other in that frame of mind, in that peace of mind, having peace of mind, and our hearts will not be troubled, and we will not be afraid. Meditate on these ideas this week, and I'm sure you'll find deep satisfaction and deep commitment and deep contentment and connection with the Christ within.